The sharp crack of a rifle echoed through the parched Montana valley as flames devoured the small homestead on the horizon, sending plumes of black smoke spiraling into the clear blue sky of 1878. Olivia Thornton pressed her face against the floorboards, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the heat intensified around her. The hem of her dress had caught fire moments ago, and she'd beaten it out with raw, blistered hands, but now she lay trapped, a fallen beam pinning her ankle to the floor as the fire consumed everything she had built over 5 years of marriage. "Gerald, Gerald, please." Her desperate scream dissolved into violent coughing as smoke filled her lungs. But her husband was long gone, having fled through the back door when the first flames appeared, flames he himself had set after discovering the empty cash box where their season's earnings had been kept. What Gerald hadn't known was that Olivia had hidden the money in her garden patch after catching him gambling away their savings in town the previous week. His rage upon finding the empty box had been terrifying. "You'll burn with your precious house," he'd snarled before striking the match that would consume their home. She had never thought him capable of such cruelty, but the whiskey and gambling debts had transformed the man she once loved. Outside the burning homestead, Samuel Northcott pulled back on his horse's reins, his eyes widening at the sight of the inferno. He had been tracking a small herd of wild mustangs when he spotted the smoke. Now, as he approached the burning structure, he caught sight of a man on horseback riding hard in the opposite direction. Samuel squinted through the heat waves rising from the prairie. Something wasn't right. No man would abandon a burning homestead unless. His stomach clenched with sudden dread. "Hello," he called out, circling the burning house. "Anyone there?" The faintest cry reached his ears, nearly drowned out by the roar of the flames. Samuel didn't hesitate. Tying his bandana over his nose and mouth, he slid from his horse, leaving his boots behind. They'd only slow him down on the burning floorboards. In his stockinged feet, he charged toward the inferno. The heat hit him like a physical blow as he crashed through the door, ducking beneath a collapsing timber. "Where are you?" he shouted, eyes stinging from the smoke. "Here." The voice was weaker now, coming from what must have been the main room. Samuel crawled beneath the smoke, feeling his way through the burning house until his hand touched something soft fabric, and beneath it, human flesh. A woman lay pinned beneath a fallen beam, her face streaked with soot and tears, her golden hair singed at the ends. "I'm going to get you out," he promised, assessing the beam that trapped her. He wrapped his hands around it, ignoring the searing pain as the wood burned his palms. With a strength born of desperation, he lifted the beam just enough for her to pull free. "My ankle," she gasped. "I cannot walk." Without hesitation, Samuel scooped her into his arms, cradling her against his chest as he navigated the burning maze that had once been a home. A support beam crashed behind them as they reached the door, and Samuel leaped through the opening, his stockinged feet landing on the hard, packed earth as he carried Olivia to safety. They collapsed a safe distance from the house, both coughing violently as their lungs struggled to clear the smoke. Samuel's feet were scraped and blistered from the burning floor, but he barely noticed the pain as he examined the woman he'd rescued. "Are you badly hurt?" he asked, inspecting her swollen ankle. Olivia looked back at her burning home, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her face. "He left me there to die," she whispered, her voice hollow with disbelief. "My husband set our home ablaze with me inside." Samuel's jaw tightened, so he had been right about the man riding away. "We need to get you to a doctor," he said, his voice gentle despite the rage building inside him. "My camp is about 2 miles north of here. Can you hold on if I put you on my horse?" Olivia nodded, her eyes never leaving the flames that consumed everything she owned in the world. "I have nothing now," she murmured, more to herself than to Samuel. "You have your life," Samuel replied, lifting her carefully onto his horse. "And sometimes that's enough to start again." As they rode away from the smoldering ruins, neither could have imagined how those words would shape the months to come. Samuel's camp was modest, but comfortable, a small tent pitched near a creek, with a stone-ringed fire pit and a few supplies neatly arranged. His skill as a tracker and occasional guide had given him an eye for choosing good camping spots, and this one offered both water and shelter from the prevailing winds. After gently lowering Olivia onto his bedroll, Samuel tended to her injured ankle. It wasn't broken, but the swelling suggested a bad sprain. He wrapped it carefully with strips torn from a clean shirt, his sun-browned hands working with surprising gentleness. "Thank you," Olivia said, watching his face as he worked. In the fading daylight, she could see him clearly for the first time, a man perhaps 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of the Montana sky. A thin scar traced his jawline and his dark hair fell in unruly waves to his collar. "I'm Olivia Thornton." "Samuel Northcott," he replied, securing the bandage. "Most folks call me Sam." He paused, clearly wrestling with the question he needed to ask. "Your husband, the man who rode away, do you think he'll come back?" Olivia's hands trembled at the memory of Gerald's face, twisted with rage as he struck the match. "I don't know," she admitted. "He thought I had hidden our money, which I had, but not for the reason he believed. He's been gambling, losing everything we worked for." Samuel nodded, his expression darkening. "Seen many a good man ruined that way, and many who weren't good to begin with." He stood, wincing as he put weight on his burned feet. "I need to tend to these feet and then I'll fix us some dinner. You rest." As Samuel moved around the camp, limping slightly but determined, Olivia found herself studying him. Unlike Gerald, who had always been meticulous about his appearance despite their frontier life, Samuel moved with the easy confidence of a man who belonged to the land. His clothes were worn but clean, his movements economical and purposeful. "You're a cowboy?" she asked as he stirred a pot of beans over the rekindled fire. Samuel smiled slightly. "Sometimes. I guide for hunting parties when they need someone who knows the territory. Track mustangs for ranchers looking to improve their stock. Do a little prospecting when times are lean." He handed her a tin cup of coffee, strong and black. "What brought you and your husband out here?" "Dreams," Olivia replied softly, warming her hands on the cup. "Gerald had visions of a cattle empire. We came from Pennsylvania with such hopes." She looked up at the star-filled sky. 5 years of drought, harsh winters, and hard work, and we had just started to get ahead this season. Samuel listened quietly, recognizing the familiar story of frontier dreams colliding with harsh reality. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "Tomorrow I'll take you to Copper Creek. There's a doctor there and a boarding house where you can stay until you decide what's next." "I have no money," Olivia admitted, shame coloring her voice. Samuel reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather pouch. "I was paid last week for guiding a hunting party from back east. Fancy gentlemen who tipped well when I led them to good hunting grounds." He counted out several dollars and held them out to her. "This should see you through a week or two at Mrs. Foster's boarding house." Olivia shook her head. "I couldn't possibly." "You can pay me back someday," Samuel interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Out here, we help each other survive. That's the code of the West, Mrs. Thornton." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Samuel had given Olivia his bedroll and had slept wrapped in his coat by the fire. As he prepared a simple breakfast of bacon and hardtack, He noticed her staring at something in her hand, a small locket, somehow survived the fire. "The only thing I have left," she explained, following his gaze. "It was my mother's." She opened it to reveal a tiny portrait of a woman with Olivia's same golden hair. "You look like her," Samuel observed, passing her a plate. "She died when I was 12. My father followed 3 years later." Olivia closed the locket carefully. "I met Gerald at a church social when I was 18. He had such grand plans, such certainty about our future." A bitter smile touched her lips. "I was so eager to believe in someone again." Samuel nodded, understanding. The frontier was littered with broken dreams and failed marriages, people who discovered too late that they weren't suited to the harsh realities of Western life. "Copper Creek is growing fast," he said, changing the subject. "The silver mine brought in folks from all over. There's work to be found if you're willing." After breakfast, Samuel helped Olivia onto his horse, then led the animal toward town, walking despite his injured feet. The journey took most of the morning, with Samuel pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the territory to distract Olivia from her pain, both physical and emotional. Copper Creek appeared on the horizon just as the sun reached its zenith, a collection of wooden buildings straddling a swiftly flowing creek, with the silver mine visible on the hillside beyond. Despite its frontier status, the town had grown rapidly in the 2 years since silver was discovered, boasting a general store, a doctor's office, 2 saloons, a small church, and the 2-story boarding house that would become Olivia's temporary home. Dr. Peterson confirmed that Olivia's ankle was badly sprained but not broken, and treated the burns on her hands. When Samuel insisted on paying the doctor's fee, Olivia's protests were silenced by a look that reminded her of their agreement she would repay him when she could. Mrs. Foster, the stern but kind-hearted widow who ran the boarding house, took one look at Olivia's singed dress and soot-streaked face and declared that a hot bath would be provided immediately, along with some spare clothing donated by the church ladies. "The poor dear," Mrs. Foster murmured to Samuel as Olivia was led upstairs by the housekeeper. "Will her husband be joining her?" Samuel's expression hardened. "Her husband is the one who left her to die in that fire, madam." Mrs. Foster's hand flew to her throat in shock. "Good heavens!" "Well, she'll be safe here, Mr. Northcott. I run a respectable house." As Samuel prepared to leave, having secured a room for Olivia and paid for a week's board in advance, he found himself reluctant to go. Something about Olivia Thornton's quiet dignity in the face of such betrayal had touched him deeply. He had long ago resigned himself to a solitary life, believing that the wandering existence he led was incompatible with having a family. Yet as he stood in the boarding house parlor, he found himself calculating how soon he could return to Copper Creek. "Mr. Northcott." Olivia's voice came from the staircase. She had bathed and changed into a simple blue dress provided by the church charity. With her golden hair still damp from washing and her face clean of soot, her beauty was even more apparent. "You're leaving?" Samuel nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. "I have a job starting tomorrow guiding a rancher to look at some Mustangs up north." Disappointment flashed across her face before she composed herself. "Of course, I wanted to thank you again, for saving my life." She descended the remaining stairs and approached him, her steps careful due to her bandaged ankle. "And for your kindness." "Anyone would have done the same," Samuel replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. Many would have ridden past the burning homestead, assuming it empty or too dangerous to approach. "When will you return to Copper Creek?" The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. A smile touched Samuel's weathered face. "I should be back in 2 weeks. Perhaps I could call on you then, To see how you're settling in." The smile that illuminated Olivia's face made something in Samuel's chest tighten. "I would like that very much." The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Olivia's life. With Mrs. Foster's help, she secured a position at the general store, where her neat handwriting and quick mind made her valuable for keeping the account books. Though her ankle remained tender, she could walk with only a slight limp, and the work allowed her to sit for much of the day. The townspeople, upon hearing her story, rallied around her with the frontier spirit of community that often surprised Easterners. The church ladies provided additional clothing, and the sheriff assured her that if Gerald Thornton ever showed his face in Copper Creek, he would be arrested for attempted murder. But despite these kindnesses, Olivia felt a growing impatience as the days passed. She found herself watching the road from the store window, hoping to glimpse a familiar figure leading a horse into town. Exactly 15 days after he had left her at the boarding house, Samuel Northcott appeared in the doorway of the general store, his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Thornton," he greeted her formally, though his eyes held a warmth that belied the formality. "I hope you're recovering well." "Mr. Northcott," Olivia replied, her cheeks coloring slightly under his gaze. "Yes, thank you. As you can see, I've found employment." Mr. Jenkins, the store owner, watched this exchange with interest, his bushy eyebrows raised. "This the fella who pulled you from that fire, Mrs. Thornton?" When Olivia nodded, the shopkeeper extended his hand to Samuel. "Then I'm mighty glad to meet you, sir. Our Mrs. Thornton here has become indispensable. Best bookkeeper I've ever had." Samuel shook the man's hand, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "I'm not surprised to hear it. Mrs. Thornton strikes me as a woman of many talents." "Well, it's nearly closing time," Mr. Jenkins announced, glancing at the clock on the wall. "Why don't you head out early, Mrs. Thornton? I'm sure you and Mr. Northcott have plenty to catch up on." Outside in the late afternoon sunlight, Olivia found herself suddenly shy. "Would you care to walk to the creek?" she suggested. "It's quite pleasant at this time of day." They strolled slowly toward the water, Samuel matching his pace to accommodate her still healing ankle. As they walked, he told her about his trip, the mustangs he'd tracked, the rancher who had hired him, the changing landscape as summer began to give way to early fall. "And you?" he asked as they reached the creek bank. "How have you fared in Copper Creek?" Olivia gestured to a fallen log where they could sit. "Better than I could have hoped. The people here have been kind. I've earned enough to begin repaying you." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a few carefully saved dollars. Samuel shook his head. "Keep it. You'll need savings of your own." "I insist," Olivia said firmly, pressing the money into his hand. "My husband may have destroyed my home and betrayed my trust, but he did not take my pride." Samuel's fingers closed around the money, understanding that for Olivia, this repayment was about more than dollars. It was about reclaiming her independence. "Has there been any word of him?" he asked. Olivia shook her head. "Sheriff Wade made inquiries. There are rumors Gerald was seen heading toward Wyoming territory, but nothing certain." She stared at the flowing creek. "I find I care less each day where he might be." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the water ripple over stones worn smooth by time and current. When Samuel finally spoke, his voice was hesitant. "I'll be in town for a few days before my next job. I thought perhaps, that is, if you were agreeable." He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Foster mentioned there's to be a social at the church on Saturday evening. Would you consider attending with me?" The invitation surprised Olivia, though not unpleasantly. In the week since the fire, she had thought often of Samuel, his courage in rushing into the flames, his kindness afterward, the surprising gentleness of his calloused hands as he bandaged her wounds. but she had not dared to hope that he might seek her company for anything beyond checking on her welfare. "I would be honored," she replied softly. "Though I should warn you, the entire town will certainly take note." Samuel's smile was slow and warm. "Let them. I've nothing to hide in admiring a courageous woman." The church social proved to be a turning point for both Samuel and Olivia. As they had predicted, their entrance together caused a stir among the townspeople. But the whispers were largely kind. Everyone had heard the story of how the tracker had ridden barefoot into a burning building to save a woman abandoned by her husband. What surprised Olivia was discovering a side of Samuel she hadn't seen before. Among the townspeople, many of whom greeted him by name, he revealed himself to be more sociable than his solitary profession might suggest. He danced awkwardly but enthusiastically, laughed readily at jokes shared by the miners, and showed unexpected knowledge about topics from politics to literature. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Northcott," Olivia observed as they shared a piece of apple pie at one of the tables set up in the churchyard. "Sam," he corrected gently. "If we're to be friends, I'd prefer you called me Sam." "Sam," she repeated, testing the name. "And I'm Olivia, not Mrs. Thornton." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Olivia, it suits you, elegant but strong." As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself sharing more of her story, her childhood in Pennsylvania, her dreams of becoming a teacher before she met Gerald, her initial excitement about pioneering in Montana territory. In turn, Samuel told her about growing up in a small Ohio town, his restless spirit that had driven him west at 19, and the decade he'd spent learning to track and survive in the wilderness. "You never long for a home of your own?" she asked as he walked her back to the boarding house under a canopy of stars. Samuel was quiet for several steps. "I thought not," he finally answered. "I told myself the open country was home enough, but lately—" He glanced at her, then quickly away. "Lately, I've been wondering if perhaps I was wrong about that." The next 2 months brought a gradual but undeniable shift in their relationship. Samuel began taking jobs closer to Copper Creek, returning to town more frequently. Each time, he would appear at the general store at closing time, hat in hand, asking if Olivia might join him for a walk or a meal at the hotel restaurant. For her part, Olivia found herself counting the days between his visits, her heart lifting at the sight of him. Mr. Jenkins teased her gently about her improved mood whenever Samuel was in town, but there was kindness in his ribbing. As summer gave way to fall, Samuel surprised Olivia one evening by leading her not toward their usual walking path, but to a small plot of land at the edge of town. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the property. A partially built cabin stood on the rise with a view of both the mountains and the town. Olivia looked from the structure to Samuel's face, confusion evident in her expression. "It's lovely land. Are you considering buying it?" "I already have," he admitted, watching her reaction carefully. "I've been working on the cabin between jobs. It's not much yet, but by winter it could be a home." Understanding dawned slowly. "You're settling in Copper Creek," Samuel nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've taken a position with the mine as their scout and security rider. Still some tracking work, but based here." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Olivia, I know it's been only a few months since we met, and under the most terrible circumstances. I know you're still legally tied to a man who betrayed you in the worst possible way, but I find myself thinking of you constantly when we're apart." Olivia's heart raced as Samuel took her hands in his calloused thumbs gently caressing her skin. "What are you saying, Sam?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you," he admitted, the words rushing out now that he'd begun. "I'm saying that I want to build a life here with you, if you'll have me." Not right away, I know you need time, and there's the matter of your husband to resolve legally. But someday, if you could consider me." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. "Oh, Sam," she whispered, "I've been afraid to admit, even to myself, how much you've come to mean to me. After Gerald, I was certain I would never trust a man again. But you rode through fire to save a stranger. You've shown me nothing but respect and kindness." Samuel's face lit with hope. "Then you might consider someday." "Yes," Olivia said simply, allowing him to draw her into a gentle embrace. "Yes, I would consider it very much." The following spring brought resolution faster than either of them had dared to hope. News reached Copper Creek that Gerald Thornton had been killed in a saloon fight in Cheyenne, apparently after cheating at cards. The sheriff of Laramie County sent official confirmation, along with Gerald's personal effects, which amounted to little more than the clothes he wore and a nearly empty wallet. Olivia received the news with complex emotions: relief that she was free, sadness for the young man she had once loved before whiskey and gambling corrupted him, and finally, a sense of closure that allowed her to look forward rather than back. 3 months later, on a perfect June morning in 1879, Samuel Northcott and Olivia Thornton were married in the small church in Copper Creek. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which spilled from the church into the street beyond. Mr. Jenkins gave the bride away. Mrs. Foster wept openly throughout the ceremony, and even the usually gruff sheriff had to clear his throat repeatedly as the couple exchanged their vows. The cabin Samuel had built was now a proper home, with a vegetable garden Olivia had planted, and curtains she had sewn from fabric, ordered from the Sears Roebuck catalog. As Samuel carried his bride across the threshold that evening, they both paused to take in the reality of their journey from a burning homestead to this moment of profound joy. "I never thought I would find happiness again," Olivia confessed as they stood in the main room of their home, the last rays of sunset streaming through the windows. "After the fire, I believed everything good in my life had turned to ash." Samuel drew her close, his eyes reflecting the same wonder he had felt the first time he saw her, smoke-stained and injured but undefeated. "Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best ones," he murmured, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "I thank God every day that I decided to track those Mustangs on that particular afternoon." "As do I," Olivia whispered, rising on tiptoe to meet his lips with hers. 5 years later, the Northcott homestead had expanded to include a larger barn, a corral for the horses Samuel trained, and a second bedroom for their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, named for Olivia's mother. Samuel's reputation as the best tracker in 3 territories had grown, but he limited his expeditions to those that would keep him close to home. Olivia had fulfilled her old dream of teaching, opening a small school in their front room for the children of Copper Creek during the winter months. On the anniversary of the day they first met, Samuel always brought Olivia wildflowers, a reminder, he said, that beauty could grow from the ashes of the past. And each year on that day, they would sit on their porch as the sun set, watching their daughter play in the yard that Samuel had fenced with his own hands, marveling at the life they had built together from such unlikely beginnings. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't seen the smoke that day?" Olivia asked, her head resting on Samuel's shoulder as they watched Emma chasing butterflies in the golden evening light. "No," Samuel answered honestly, his arm tightening around his wife. "Because I believe some things are meant to be, no matter what path brings them about. If not that day, then another. If not that fire, then some other circumstance." He turned to look into her eyes, still as blue and clear as the day he'd first seen them through the smoke. I was always meant to find you, Olivia, and you were always meant to show me what home really is." As the sun slipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia leaned up to kiss her husband, silently thanking whatever fate or providence had led him to her on that terrible day. From the destruction of one life had come the creation of another, far richer than she could have imagined in those dark moments when smoke filled her lungs and hope seemed lost forever. And in the distance, as if to underscore their triumph over adversity, a brilliant rainbow arched across the darkening sky, a promise fulfilled, a love hard won, a future stretching endlessly before them.